Hi everyone, and welcome to our video. I'm going to be talking about some overnight jobs that you can do as a licensed therapist. I know that for a lot of us, we think about things that are outside the box, and so these are some options of things to think about when it comes to overnight work options. So, some of the available options are shift work, which means working typically 8 hours, 12-hour, or 10-hour shifts. PRN, per requested need, as far as a job where you only work when they need you. Typically with those jobs, they tend to ask for your availability usually about a month or 2 weeks ahead of time. And then if you're available during those times, they need you for some type of staffing need, then they call you and then you go to work. There's also the option of being on call, which means that you may not necessarily be at the physical location, but if they need you for something, you're providing, clinical feedback. And sometimes that also means that you have to go to a facility if you are on call in some way. All right. So some of the options are number one, being working on a crisis hotline. This typically tends to go into the category of shift work. It has varied educational requirements. Some roles require a clinical license, some roles just require a high school diploma. So it really depends on where you live within the United States and other parameters that they require for a job like that. There's oftentimes opportunities to advance when it comes to supervisory opportunities or even working as a manager within a crisis hotline type of setting. So it can be a great fit for somebody who really needs hours that are outside of traditional business hours. Typically, crisis hotlines are staffed 24/7, 365. So that also gives you a chance to work another job and maybe use this as a PRN job or as a part time job in addition to something that you're already doing. It also can be a full time job in and of itself. So that's an option of a role that you can work overnight in, as well as working other shifts too. Another option is that of being an emergency room assessor. And so the title does vary when it comes to being an assessor. Sometimes it's, working in the hospital admission. Sometimes it's being kind of a mental health assessor. It really depends on the facility and also the health system that you're working in. This These roles typically tend to be fast paced because they're based at an emergency room. They almost always require a clinical license, especially in the states where there's title protection, and you can't call yourself a therapist or a social worker without having a license. Typically, these are licensed roles. However, sometimes in more rural areas, these roles don't require a license. So it also depends on, like I said before, where you are in the country. Typically, in this role, you're providing services as far as assessments and care coordination for people who are struggling with mental health and also substance abuse. A lot of times, you may be doing an evaluation and you may be talking to the person about, if they're having any trouble, taking care of themselves and also doing some problem solving around next steps and if they are appropriate to discharge home versus going into an inpatient psychiatric facility for additional stabilization. There's also a high level of collaboration with staff when it comes to just care planning and making sure that there is hopefully a solid discharge plan in place when it comes to making sure that they have everything that they need. Another option for overnight jobs is that of after hours utilization review. Typically, some of these companies provide these types of roles: United, Cigna, Humana, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Aetna. Usually, in some way, shape, or form, they hire people overnight to do what they call pre certifications. So, if someone is going into an inpatient psychiatric facility, a lot of times the hospital will have to call the insurance company just to get that initial authorization, and the person that they talk to would be the one that's working for one of these companies. So it can be a great fit if you want to work from home, but you also want to still use your clinical skills, but also not have some of that direct care responsibility at the same time. So these are roles that you definitely want to keep your eyes open for if you're looking for something that gives you a break from direct care and also something that's a little bit outside the box when it comes to working overnight hours. Another option is that of being an online adjunct faculty. This is a role that can be done on your own time and has flexible hours typically. So that means that's something that, if you are a night owl and you tend to be up late, you can work nights, you can work any hours that you need to meet some of the metrics and the requirements for roles. Typically, there's minimal requirements during the workday. This is work that can typically be done in the evenings, but it also can be tedious when it comes to grading and reading some papers and the work from students. It also can take up sometimes more time than you expect, but it is incredibly flexible and something that you can work overnight or work late evenings. And you don't have to be tied to a traditional business day schedule to work as an online adjunct faculty member. An additional option is working kind of mobile crisis on call. This usually means that you are assisting a mental health crisis team. A lot of times they partner with law enforcement when it comes to encountering people that may be experiencing a mental health crisis or who are under the influence of some substances. Usually you're utilizing your clinical expertise, and a lot of times the requirement is that you're mobile in some way, whether you're going with the crisis team or whether you are providing that clinical feedback or going to the hospital to meet sometimes the patient that's being transported there. So the role really can vary and really depends on the health system and also the community mental health services that are available in the area. And last but not least, another option for overnight work is working in admissions or intake in a behavioral health hospital. And so, usually with those roles, a clinical license is required. However, it does have flexible hours. Typically, it's shift work, so 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours. Usually, you have multiple patients, and it can be very fast paced because even though it's not necessarily a traditional kind of med surge emergency room, it is considered an emergency room for mental health. So that means that you are a lot of times in situations where you are de-escalating patients, where you're providing additional guidance, when you're doing assessments, when you're answering phones, when you're doing pre-certs. It can be very busy, but it's also something that's staffed 24/7, 365. So there's a lot of flexibility with scheduling and also working overnights if you choose to. All right. So thank you so much for watching. If you've made it to this point, please feel free to check out my Patreon, The Pivoted Path. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what I missed in the comments. Thanks so much, and I'll catch you on the next video.